We welcome next Oliver Bauer from Vista. He's a data governance, architecture, and technology lead, building structures from an organizational and data perspective to help achieve the vision of transforming Vista into an iconic data analytics-driven company, helping them currently move towards scalable, decentralized data mesh organization that really embraces those principles that Jamak wrote down 3 years back and that we've all been trying to figure out our own journey towards ever since. The title of the talk is Making a Mesh Start, How Vista is Moving Away from Centralized Data for Good. And the title itself belies the fact that, as Oliver will share with us, Vista is 100% committed towards moving towards this decentralized data mesh approach. And like all the rest of you, I'm quite interested to hear some of the key learnings that they've had on that journey, some of the challenges, and how the Vista is trying to overcome some of those challenges. So Oliver, welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Brandon, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to my talk, Making a Mesh Start. Today, I will describe how Vista is moving away from centralized data for good and that there is no way back. But before, let's start with a quick introduction about Vista and about our data analytics department. What is Vista? Vista wants to become the design and marketing partner for small businesses. We are the marketing partner for them, and we want to make their life as easy as possible to conduct their marketing activities. Our core business of Vista has always been print. We have been named Vista Print previously and did not rename recently to Vista because we are expanding our activities. Because for small and medium businesses, everything starts with design, and everybody deserves great design. This is why we have expanded our scope now with design and also with other channels than just print. For example, we have acquired 99 Designs, Design Network, and also Crello, that can enable you to play your marketing content into different channels like social media or Instagram. And we went also into a partnership with Wix because we really believe everybody deserves good design, and design should be as usable as possible, as easy usable as possible in all marketing channels for small businesses. Let's look at Vista. Vista is more or less a 1.5 billion startup. We are a tech-driven leader in mass customization and have a heritage of over 20 years. But at the core, we really believe that we are a startup with 1.5 billion revenue, and that enables us to do awesome things. In the year 2020, we restarted the data and analytics at Vista. For that, we hired a new chief data officer who is reporting directly in the CEO and united all different people who were working in analytics under his leadership. And under his leadership, we started to transform the organization and also the department into his vision to transform Vista into one of the world's most iconic data analytics-driven companies. That was ultimately also the sales pitch that made me sign up to join Vista Print in early 2020. At our core belief, we really think that data should be like water. Sometimes people talk about data like oil, right? But we think it's not 100% the right way. We want to see data like water. It should create life. Let's see how trees are growing or how flowers are really prospering with water, and it should be used everywhere. And therefore, our bold vision with DNA is to use the water everywhere. In our dual mission, we want to create, on the one hand side, substantial and lasting values for our customers and our stakeholders with industry-leading data products, insight, and expertise. But on the other hand, also build a kick-ass data analytics organization that attracts, excites, and develops and retains exceptional and diverse talent. After giving you a quick introduction about Vista, I would now deep dive into what was wrong with our old data stack and what didn't work anymore. And there are three distinct reasons for that, why data in our old organizational structure did not work anymore. The first one was there had been an organizational, but also a technology ceiling. For example, the technology we were using was old and it did not scale anymore with the load. We also had a centralized warehouse team that was more or less the gatekeeper and limited our overall velocity. If an analyst needed an additional attribute, for his report, they would go to the central data warehouse team and add their request to a very long backlog, and it would eventually get done, but the velocity was overall not very good. And what happened with that stack as well, we had a layering on top of a layering, on top of a layering, on top of a layering that even decreased our velocity further. Secondly, we also had siloed capabilities. The domain knowledge of the central data platform team was missing, and data producers were just dumping their stuff into SQL 001. That was the central warehouse where all operational data was collected. And then data engineers were processing that stuff in a domain agnostic fashion, and analysts then asked the data engineers about very specific questions about their data. So the capabilities were not distributed equally across, and everybody tried to solve their problems, but sometimes it felt like using a screwdriver when a pipe wrench was needed. And the third point that I want to mention is data operations. We did have a lot of analysts, but not a lot of self-service tools. So the analysts were trying to answer all the questions of the stakeholders over and over again and had more or less the same questions. So when we had to build something, then it also happened that one specific person owned a report or a table in the data warehouse. Whoops, maybe that person have left 1 year ago, and who does have the domain knowledge about that table now, and who owns it actually? So basically, based on all those observations, we ask ourselves, let's have time for a mesh start. Dream big and be bold. To overcome those challenges, we wanted to completely reorganize the way how we are approaching data at Vista. First of all, we wanted to go from component-based teams to end-to-end feature teams. We wanted to go from a central domain agnostic data team to many domain-driven teams who have a very deep knowledge in their data. We wanted to go from one central monolithic stack to a fully distributed modern data stack. And we wanted also to go from data as somewhat a byproduct to go to data as a self-service, where everybody can look up the data and understand what it is. So this is why we said, let's dream big. And the only small challenge for us was that it is just a one-way door. There is no way back. We are decommissioning our old monolith in the data stack and are moving full steam into the world of a data mesh. And this is why we also will shut down the monolith very soon. So basically, that also meant we had to rebuild everything that we have done in the last 10 years in a new operational model with a new team, with a new team setup, and get to version 1 in a very, very short period of time to be ready for the overarching replatforming that we have been doing in the last 2 years of Vista, from a monolithic architecture of a technology stack to the microservice architecture. So basically, it had been a time for a mesh start, and we really decided to be super bold and drive towards a data mesh with no way back. Looking at that in a bit deeper, why do we think the data mesh has an advantage for us? So let me name 3 different arguments for you. The first of them is to have end-to-end data product teams. And we truly believe that those end-to-end data product teams make a difference. The teams have a product owner, have data engineers, data scientists, and data analysts on their team to really solve one very specific business question and build a product out of that. And in their domain, they really focus on the business problem and soak in all the business context and get true experts in their field. And those small teams have the capability that they can deliver independently in their area. The second argument that I want to highlight here is product thinking. We really want to push for customer obsession, that thinking about data as a product and holding up the bar for product management to also manage data as a product, to understand the customer needs and to tailor the solution to solve our customers' problems that can be sometimes stakeholders or sometimes helping to improve the user experience directly on the website. The last thing that I want to mention is high impact and high scalability. Because we moved from feature from component teams to feature teams, we can work now much more in parallel, and scaling had become much easier. And basically, we built up in those 2 years 25 different of those data product teams, who then built dashboards and reports in Looker, tables, data tables in Snowflake, and also APIs. And in the last 2 years, we built approximately 100 different data products that serve different needs across the organization along the whole value chain. From the very start of marketing activities like intelligent ROAS services, or to the very end of the value chain in manufacturing or in a care center. So let's look at one or two of these. What are we actually doing? This one is a self-service report that is called the Lines of Business Explorer. So what is it? We want to get more insights about our financial transactions, the order, the subscriptions, and you can drill down in 630 fields into the data. So every stakeholder is now able to not just see the surface of that, but also to drill down into different fields, cut and slice by different dimensions, and understand what the different data is. And if we think about now, what is the advantage with the data mesh? We always had dashboards for sure, but now we had a scalable way to build dashboards, and went from one person who built a small limited dashboard to a scalable approach to build also much larger dashboards. And as the teams work in an end-to-end manner, the whole team owns not a dashboard, including the pipeline, the orchestration to it, and the data quality checks. And so we can offer the data in a much more granular way because we don't layer things on top of things anymore. And the additional advantage that comes along with the data mesh, because we can deliver on those things, is instead of we do it for you, we can point our stakeholders now to those dashboards who can consume the data by themselves, and using this also to push data literacy across the organization. Let's look at a different example of a data product that we're building. What you can see here is a personalization algorithm that classifies the industry of our customers. Let's have a look at what are the advantages of using a data mesh for building this algorithm out. At the beginning, before we started the data analytics journey, it was rather cumbersome to get all the data and to get the building of the machine learning model right. First of all, the central data warehouse was a bottleneck, and now data is much more wider available. So the team that is building this algorithm can investigate the broad spectrum of data to understand what features are actually helpful in improving the prediction of the algorithms. And also, they can directly reach out to the domain experts, because we do have now the domain experts directly in those teams, and there is a direct one-to-one relationship between the consumers and the producers, and it's not going through a third party that is not knowledgeable about the data. And as we have taken out the central party of this communication, it becomes much more scalable overall, which the machine learning algorithms have really benefited for. And based on those two examples, we do a lot of different data products across the whole value chain, as I said earlier, from manufacturing through pricing, through personalization, but also in design, where a lot of more machine learning algorithms can be employed. Now, as I have given you an overview about what is Vista, what is the DNA journey, what are advantages we see in a data mesh since the 2 years we are employing it, let's jump a bit deeper into the key learnings that we have identified and guide you through 4 different areas. The first one is strong foundations. The second one, you need to enable fast-paced innovation. And the third one is product thinking. And the last one is interoperability. Let's deep dive through those step by step. Looking into strong foundations, I think this is one of the very key learnings that we had. You need to have strong foundations before you start. You need to have the right organizational foundations. You need to have the top management support to do that, but you also need to have the technical foundations. And let me deep dive into some examples, what really helped us to make the data mesh a success at Vista. The first thing is to have a very good data domain map. When you think about your monolith, it's like a city map, right? Where there's a lot of data with different districts, with different streets. And now we need to separate this city into smaller areas that are recognized to be very similar and that become the team boundaries or domain boundaries. And the data domain map helped us in the first place to identify which team is responsible for what, which team is driving what, where we have challenges and not enough capacity, where we have challenges in the data itself, and also help very much to align ownership and also to align the single source of truth. The second thing that I want to highlight for strong foundations is also the data platform with an integrated tooling. So the better the data platform, the easier is the transitions. I think it's fair to say that in the current data stack, not all tools might be available. And it is somewhat like APIs in software engineering 20 years ago, right? Not all things that we wanted to deliver and wanted to do, there was tooling available at our fingertips. But we want the teams in the data product teams who are working in their business problem and want to focus on solving this specific business problem as much as possible to focus on the problem and not on all the infrastructure that is needed. This is why we work closely together with our data platform team and try to establish strong foundations of the platform. This starts with a data catalog. This starts with a very strong database that you use as backend of your data mesh. And it also starts with having the right compute available. And there are different answers to solve this problem, and there's no right and wrong. We decided to use Snowflake as central instance for our data mesh because it already solves quite a lot of things for interoperability, which I will talk a bit later. And there is also one other key learning. You have basically two different needs. On the first-hand side, if you build something, you want to be the data as stable as possible. That is in stark contrast with the desire to store everything, because there might be value in it that we can create for the future. So to balance off the trade-off, we invented a process to make it as simple as possible to ingest data into our data mesh. And then the different teams work together in productionizing the data to a stable part. And those are a lot of things we've thought about to simplify things to the maximum for the data producers and data consumers, that they can really focus on the things that drive value and not need to take care of the infrastructure that they're working on. Let me maybe quickly come back to the right organizational foundations. One really good thing that we also did is we created a pair of data principles that we established across the organization that tell the whole organization, we want to value data as an asset. We want to think about data in this separation that I explained earlier of investigatable data and of stable data, along with many other things. And that really also helped to increase the top management support and to also have conversations with other parts in the organization where we wanted to increase or expand the data ingestion into their processes. Okay, having talked about the strong foundations, let me now come to the next part, to fast-paced innovation. In fast-paced innovation, I think it is, when you think about it, we decentralize things with the data mesh. And decentralization means innovation, right? Because in a decentralized model, there is fertile ground for innovation and a lot of new things can be developed. A lot of new things can be experimented, and you do increase the rate of experimentation across the organization. That's awesome because we learn a lot of new things, and innovation drives also better uses of best practices and also accounts for diverse talent, that different people have different preferences, and one might rather work in Spark, the other might rather work in SQL. And so we like to enforce that or foster that, and decentralization means innovation. At the same point in time, decentralization also means reinventing the wheel sometimes. So how can you balance off those trade-offs? We believe that local innovation is great, but we also don't want every data product team to reinvent the wheel and start with an empty editor. So what we are trying to do is to use those best practices that have been implemented in decentralized innovation and develop them into reusable blueprints. And then also with those blueprints, elevate the tool set of the data platform stack. It's important to say that I truly believe optionality wins here, and you should not prescribe too much across the organization, because that will kill again innovation. One other thing that we have also learned is that you really need to foster communication between the teams. Because data consumers and data producers have now a heightened need to communicate as they negotiate individual requirements or transfer best practices across the organization. It's important to think how you can structurally increase the organization and also how to build bonds and trust across those teams. Let me now come to another very important learning that we had across our journey in the data mesh. That is product thinking for data. And we want data to be a product. We don't want to be a side product, as it had been in sometimes that people don't treat data with the high standards they would treat their site, right? But we want to really believe that as an organization, data is a product. It is like an API. It is like an artifact on a site. It is like any other running software. It's a product. And this is not very easy, because sometimes there is data being generated and then we don't want to have to do something with it. We just want to give it away. So change management is really indispensable here, and to explain the value that is coming out of it, to explain the value, why productionizing it is really helpful. And the second point that is really important to make here is we want teams in the data analytics organization across all of Vista to really embrace full product ownership over their data. And so all data producers in engineering, in data, in everywhere in the organization need to orient to their customers and think about their needs, right? And this change is really hard, and also does not just require to tell people you are now responsible for, but you also need to think how you can role model, how you can foster the message across the organization, and also what skills are relevant across the organization to really deliver on that. And we also want to create incentives, for example, by setting OKRs overall. And then that also comes back to the data principles that I talked earlier about, that data principles do really help in enforcing and also in fostering the product thinking, to stating very clearly across the whole organization that data is really important. Let us now come to the last big area of learnings that we had in the last 2 years of moving towards the data mesh. The first one is, and it's about interoperability. And it's a very interesting trade-off that you always would run into. It's between flexibility and harmonization. Because you have now decentralized a lot of things that have been done centrally before, there really interesting questions arise. And I want to highlight 3 of them here. The first one is the appropriate architecture. Second one is around data modeling. And the third one is about standards. When you think about the architecture, we at Vistaprint use Snowflake, as I said earlier, as central data storage, Databricks for Spark computing. Then we use tooling for SQL-based transformation like dbt, and then we use Airflow for scheduling. Now, we don't want all different teams to operate their own infrastructure, so a platform team is super helpful. They also can help to keep things interoperable. If you don't use Snowflake as we do, but 3 different databases, you need to be able to align access rights and roles and accessibility for all of them, which makes it already a bit more complicated. significant of those tools that I mentioned, there might be significant tailoring necessary to ensure they're working well in a decentralized architecture. And a lot of those things you need to automate and can't do manually anymore, as you might have done before in a central environment. Let me give you one or two examples. One example is we want to have very good isolation between the different data product teams. If you think now about Airflow, if you install a new DAG, you might need to restart the whole instance. That might not be a good idea if 100 data products are being orchestrated there, because something will break or being stopped. So this is why you need to isolate now the different teams, or let people decide what they want to isolate or not. And I think there's a similar story that we had with Databricks to think about how can we achieve the right amount of isolation between the different teams. That was not such a very important question before, because we were running a more centralized approach. Second thing that I wanted to highlight here is data modeling. If you think about data modeling, before you might have one or two persons in your company that are really focusing on providing a very good data model to the organization that is centrally curated. Now, when you think about the data mesh, there is no central team anymore that is curating all the data and that is creating a central data model. So how do you align now across the organization a decentralized data model and create one unified entity relationship chart? We haven't fully found out. If you have found that out, please let me know. I'm very curious to hear. But there are some things that we're trying to do to harmonize that. That starts with aligning of naming, of column names, for example, updated at or modified at. That starts with harmonization of ID names and to employ scanning to reduce one people using shopper ID, the other naming it canonical ID. Those things were very much simple before, but became now much more challenging because we are in a decentralized environment now. Now you can think, okay, let's put out a lot of standards that regulates everything. Be careful with that because of two reasons. The first one is I truly believe it kills innovation. It kills innovation that people are trying to be pushed into a too small space where they can do something. And it's very easy also to violate rules. And then you have a long list of violation that feels like a lot of tech debt that the team needs to resolve. So you need to be also careful when moving into the data mesh, to think about what are the right standards I want to employ across the organization, and what are standards that I probably should not employ, because it can kill innovation. So having talked now about those 4 different areas where we had key learnings, let me maybe give you a bit of an outlook going forward, where we want to go, and the moment when somebody will switch the very large switch to decommission or old warehouse in the outlook. So we want to become one of the world's most iconic data analytics driven companies. I think in the last 3 years, we have taken significant steps to get better here and to go away from our centralized stack into a data mesh. The data mesh solves a lot of organizational problems, and it really aligns domain knowledge with data ownership. That is great. It also creates new challenges that we as a whole community need to work on to solve that, because you distribute now tasks that you haven't done before. That starts with data quality, right? Or with orchestration, you might still want to have a central view about it, but it's not being done anymore centrally. And I think those are, as I said earlier, maybe similar challenges that the industry in software engineering had several years ago when they moved fully into microservices approach, and people found so interesting solution. And I truly believe that there's a lot of opportunity to find for those challenges better solution as we have them today. When we look forward into the future, we really believe that the data mesh is helping us to innovate our customer experience, which we believe is a truly outstanding business opportunity, but also can be a competitive advantage to drive forward and to increase the rate of experimentation and to paralyze the creation of data-based business models or machine learning algorithms across the company. And we are truly excited about that. We are also excited about switching off the old central warehouse. That will still take a bit of time until we have also re-platformed our software stack from a monolith to a microservices environment, and we're truly excited about that. And I'm sure there will be a big party when somebody moves the big switch to off, and then all pipelines are automatically switching to the new stack, and we have successfully decommissioned our old warehouse, and then there is really no way back anymore. The last thing that we see for the future is to solve the unsolved challenges. That starts about things I talked earlier about, thinking about data modeling, creating more harmonization. That is also certainly in the area of data quality where we need to get better, and also in the area of cross-orchestrating jobs across different teams and across different domain scopes. That is certainly something we will need to think a bit more in the future, and I'm truly excited about that. At the end, we believe with using the data mesh, we can democratize data, we can enable more innovations, and we hope that it brings us more to our Chief Data Officer's vision to become one of the world's most iconic data analytics-driven company in the world. With that, if you're interested to keep up with what we're doing, please feel free to follow our journey. Look on our microsite, vista.io, follow our microsite or show site on LinkedIn, and feel free to add me there as well. And I leave you now with a big thank you for listening to my talk and being curious about our journey at VistaPrint. And I hope you learned something about the challenges and the opportunities that we're getting from moving into the data mesh and having a mesh start. Thank you.